Srila Prabhupada Lilamrta, Additional Pastimes, Around the World, 1967 to 1969, and 1972 to 1975. Additional Pastimes of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, by Satsvarup Das Goswami. Chapter 10, A World Tour, Part 2. February 1975. Srila Prabhupada returned to Mexico in February of 1975. During the 3 years that had passed since his first visit, more centers had opened in the Caribbean and South America. In Trinidad, the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, American disciples had worked with local devotees to establish centers. Also in Caracas and Buenos Aires, many people had contacted Prabhupada's disciples and began chanting and reading his books. In 1974, Srila Prabhupada appointed Hridayananda Goswami the governing body commissioner for all of Latin America. And from that point, the Krishna consciousness movement in Latin America began rapidly expanding. Prabhupada wrote to his newly appointed GBC secretary, quote, "Just as Hansaduta and Bhagavan have gone to foreign countries and arranged for a solid program of translation, printing, and distribution of my books by Sankirtan Party, so you will also find the devotees in South America willing to help you in this noble project, which is for the benediction of the suffering humanity. My own Guru Maharaj stressed the printing and distribution of literature, even over gorgeous temple construction. And I also was printing, even before I had big temples in the U.S. So you may follow the footsteps of the previous acharyas, while always strictly following the regulative principles for spiritual strength." Unquote. With Srila Prabhupada's blessings and with intense youthful energy, Hridayananda Goswami traveled constantly from one South American country to another, preaching the message of Srila Prabhupada and organizing the distribution of his books in Spanish and Portuguese. Srila Prabhupada was pleased to hear of his disciples' progress. Quote, "I have received the copy of the Spanish Back to Godhead, and it is done very nicely. The printing is very beautiful, and I thank you very much for doing such a nice job. I am very glad to hear you have printed 100,000 copies of this magazine. Now give them to everyone. Also, I am very happy to hear the other books will be coming out very soon. If you can finish Bhagavad Gita as it is in Spanish and show me at the Mayapur festival, that will be very sublime. Please print as many books as possible. This is my real pleasure. By printing these books of our Krishna conscious philosophy in so many different languages, we can actually inject our movement into the masses of persons all over the world, especially there in the Western countries, and we can literally turn whole nations into Krishna-conscious nations. Thank you for representing me there in South America by stressing the importance of attendance to the morning and evening programs and following all of the spiritual practices. This is wanted. Without these things, there is no devotional life." Unquote. In all of his letters to Srila Prabhupada, Hridayananda Maharaj humbly requested Prabhupada to visit the centers most ready to receive him, Mexico City and Caracas. Prabhupada replied that he wanted to visit and would do so on his next Western tour. Leaving Bombay in January 1975, Srila Prabhupada made his way west by his usual route, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Hawaii. Hridayananda Goswami flew to Hawaii just to make sure Srila Prabhupada would come to Mexico. 2 or 3 times between 1972 and 1975, the devotees in Mexico had thought Srila Prabhupada was definitely coming. Once they had been within 2 hours of his expected arrival, with the temple fully decorated with flowers, when his secretary had phoned and said Prabhupada would come later. On that occasion, the devotees had become overwhelmed and had thrown flowers and handfuls of cake at one another while crying and laughing. When Srila Prabhupada finally came in February 1975, Sri Dayananda Maharaj arranged for a first-class reception at the airport. He convinced the airport and police officials that Srila Prabhupada should be met with a special car just as he came down the ramp from the airplane, that he and his party should bypass immigration and customs formalities, and that police on motorcycles should escort his car all the way to the temple. Srila Prabhupada smiled with pleasure to see all this take place. He was prepared to undergo difficulties, but he also often complained about immigration officers who were so ignorant of spiritual etiquette as to question a sadhu at the border. He sometimes compared the immigration's men to watchdogs. Rough, where's your visa? Formerly, a sadhu would be allowed to enter even the king's palace, Srila Prabhupada said. But Srila Prabhupada was often delayed, searched, quarantined, and even refused entry into a country. Therefore, the proper reception by the government and police of Mexico was a pleasant surprise. With sirens wailing, 2 police motorcycles led the way onto the highway as Srila Prabhupada, profusely garlanded, sat in the rear of the black limousine, chanting on his beats and discussing Krishna-conscious plans with his leading disciples. For this visit, the devotees at the temple were fully prepared. Some of them remembered how Srila Prabhupada had arrived in 1972 to find the temple almost empty, most of the devotees being en route to the airport to greet him. This time they had been rehearsing this arrival for weeks. Tonio Fernandez. We practiced the conch shell, the kartals, everything. Someone would even go on the top of the roof and say that he saw the car of Prabhupada. In this way we rehearsed. I was in charge of the sound control, and I had to run from there to the gate. It had been decided beforehand where everyone would sit when Prabhupada gave a class. But when Prabhupada actually came, someone blew the conch shell out of time, and all the devotees started to run. Kshiti Mohana. It was a scene with players, and the play was that Prabhupada was coming. We had practiced, but now it was the real thing. The first car that came was Prabhupada's servants. The devotees were having ecstasies because they thought it was Prabhupada. As soon as they saw a devotee that didn't look Mexican, they started to feel that Prabhupada was here. Prabhupada's servants said to the devotees in charge of the program, "Take it easy. Now Prabhupada is going to arrive at any moment." Then 2 of Prabhupada's servants went up to look at Prabhupada's room to see if it was ready or if anything was missing. After that, the kirtan calmed down a little so we could hear the conch shell. But we had to wait half an hour because Prabhupada's car was coming slowly. The boy on the roof finally saw Prabhupada's car, but he forgot to blow the conch shell and began to yell, "Prabhupada is coming! Prabhupada is coming! Have kirtan! Jai Prabhupada! Jai Prabhupada!" It was a very exciting moment. Prabhupada's car then appeared and slowly moved onto the property. It stopped a little before the front door. Then Prabhupada got out, and everyone threw petals from the roof. Sri Dayananda Maharaj opened the car door, and Prabhupada, in a very particular way, came out and stood up and looked all around. Everyone was giving his obeisances to Prabhupada, but at the same time, no one knew exactly what was happening. Sri Dayananda Maharaj was more excited than anyone else. He was telling the devotees, "Kirtan, kirtan." Nanda Prana. When Prabhupada came to the temple, he was besieged with a rain of petals. There were 2 lines of devotees and karmis mixed, and Prabhupada passed through. Everything was well organized. People were throwing petals. The lines started from the beginning of the entrance all the way to the temple house. Everyone was throwing petals, and Prabhupada went all the way into the main hall where they had his Vyasasan. But instead of going to sit down, he went into the small temple room to see the deities. After Prabhupada saw the deities, he looked at the temple room. Oh, much improved. Then Hridayananda Maharaj invited him to go to the Vyasasan, where Prabhupada sat, and they washed his feet and did a Guru Puja. It was a better standard than the first time. Roberto Ruiz. I had never seen Srila Prabhupada before that. I was seeing him in pictures and in the magazine, but I had never seen personally, so I was very nervous. As soon as he will see me, I thought, he will know I am a cheater. He will look through my demoniac nature. Then, finally, Srila Prabhupada arrived at the temple. The devotees received him with a shower of flower petals. The reception was nice because as soon as he arrived at the airport, someone had called the temple and told us, Prabhupada is here. He has put his lotus feet in Mexico. Kshiti Mohana. The big windows in the main hall were painted with plastic yellow paint, and the sun was shining through on Prabhupada's face like amber. One man was on the left side, and another strong man was on the right. They were the Kshatriyas of Prabhupada. They were looking after him if someone wanted to cross in front of them. Prabhupada started to sing Vandeham, and the devotees and guests tried to follow, but most of them just let it go. After Guru Puja, Prabhupada spoke in English to the assembled devotees. As usual, after every few sentences, his words were translated by one of the devotees. My dear devotees, ladies and gentlemen, Prabhupada began, I am very glad to see you again. I think after 4 years. I was trying to come here again. I liked this place, but due to various engagements and due to my old age also, I could not come earlier. But this time, by arrangement of our Hridayananda Maharaj, I have been forced to come here. At these words, the devotees burst into appreciative laughter. So, I must thank you for your nice reception. I was received by police escort very nicely, and I remember once I traveled with the governor of UP in 1962 from Lucknow to Kanpur. So, exactly we were driving in the same fashion, escorted by the police motorcycle. So anyway, I am so pleased to see you, that you are interested in this Krishna consciousness movement. So, the Krishna consciousness movement is very, very important for the human society. It is not exactly a religious movement as it is understood in the Western countries. Religion is described in the English dictionary as a kind of faith. And once again, the pure transcendental message was coming from Prabhupada's lotus-like mouth in the company of the devotees of Mexico. Their great saintly spiritual master, the spiritual master of the whole world, was now again with them in ISKCON, Mexico, and the devotees listened and watched him with rapt attention. It is very simple and easy, Prabhupada said, describing Krishna consciousness. If you do not know, if you are not educated, if you have no asset, you can simply chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And if you are educated, a logician, a philosopher, you can read our books, which are already 50 in number. There will be about 75 books of 400 pages to convince the philosopher, scientist, and educationist what is Krishna consciousness. They are published in English as well as other European languages. Take advantage of this. Along with the deity worship in this temple, hold classes at least 5 hours. As in the schools and colleges, there are regular classes, 45-minute class, then 5 or 10-minute recess, again 45-minute class, in this way. So we have got enough subject matter to study, and if we study all these books, to finish them it will take at least 25 years. So you are all young men. I request you to engage your time in reading books, in chanting, in deity worship, in going to preach, selling books. Don't be lazy. Always remain engaged. Then that is Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada spoke briefly. Then he asked for questions. A guest asked, "If everyone is spirit soul, then isn't sex life also spiritual?" Prabhupada: "There is no sex life in the spirit soul. Sex life is in the material body. We are not this body. But because we are in this body, therefore we are thinking pleasure of the body is pleasure of the soul." The second question: "Who are we? Why are we here? And where are we going?" Prabhupada: "You are all living entities. You wanted to come here. Just like I wanted to come in your city, I have come here. Similarly, you wanted to come to this material world and enjoy. So, because you wanted to enjoy this material world, you have come here. Krishna has allowed you to come here, and you are trying to enjoy this material world. This is called struggle for existence. But you will never be happy with this material world. It is simply a struggle for existence. Therefore, you should go back to home, back to Godhead. Then you'll be happy. That's all." At the end of the questions and answers session, a Mexican lady stood up spontaneously and said in English, "In the name of all the guests and all the Mexico City Temple, we welcome you." One of Prabhupada's sannyasi disciples, Hanuman, had fallen down from the sannyas standard and had married. Such a thing had never before happened in ISKCON. But now, on Prabhupada's first day in Mexico, Hanuman, dressed as a householder, came to see his spiritual master. After the crowd of guests had left Prabhupada's room, only Hanuman and a few senior men remained. "Srila Prabhupada," Hanuman began, "Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had one disciple in the renounced order, Chota Haridas, whom he rejected from his association because he became too much lusty after a woman. I was also one of your sannyas disciples, and I too became lusty after a woman. I was wondering if you have also rejected me from your association." A heavy silence followed as everyone looked at Prabhupada, who sat with his head down. After a long pause, Prabhupada looked up at Hanuman and said quietly, "Lord Chaitanya is God. He can spread this movement all over the world in 1 second without the help of anyone if he likes. I am not God. I am simply a servant of God. I require so much assistance to help me spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. If someone renders even some small service to help me, I am eternally indebted to him. You have rendered so much assistance to me. How could I reject you?" The devotees were moved, amazed at the depth of Srila Prabhupada's compassion. Then Hanuman began to tell Srila Prabhupada about his family, about his son named Bhaktivedanta. "That is not very good," Srila Prabhupada shook his head. "Sometimes you may have to chastise your child, and you should not be chastising your guru." Hanuman became a little disturbed. "But Srila Prabhupada," he said, "we have already grown accustomed to calling him that. What will we call him now?" But Prabhupada thought and then explained that actually it was all right, because his name was Bhaktivedanta Das. "Just like we name our disciples Krishna Das," Prabhupada said, "not Krishna, but servant of Krishna. Just like you are not Hanuman, but servant of." On the first evening of his visit, Prabhupada lectured from the Bhagavad Gita. After the lecture, he asked for questions. Hridayananda Maharaj, seated on a cushion at Prabhupada's feet, translated the inquiries from Spanish into English for Prabhupada, and then translated Prabhupada's reply into Spanish for the audience. Hridayananda Maharaj. He asks, "What if we've already committed so many offenses to chanting? At this point, how can we purify?" Prabhupada. "If we don't commit offense, why do you voluntarily commit offense? You should not commit offense. Then it will be all right, purified." Hridayananda Maharaj. "We don't know how we can increase our desire for chanting." Prabhupada. "By performing Sankirtan. Just like if a man drinks, and if he drinks and drinks, then he becomes a drunkard. The example amused the audience, and they broke into laughter. Drink more and more, and you become a drunkard, Prabhupada continued. Similarly, chant more and more, and you become perfect chanter. Sri Dayananda Maharaj, what is the greatest offense? Prabhupada, yes, that is the first offense. Guror avagya sruti shastra nindanam. Sruti shastra nindanam guror avagya. Avagya. If you accept a guru and then again disobey him, then what is your position? You are not a gentleman. You promised before Guru, before Krishna, before fire, that I shall obey your order, I shall execute this. If again you do not do this, then you are not even a gentleman. What to speak of a devotee? This is common sense. A man asked in Spanish, "Excuse me, sir, before, in your previous life as a karmi, what were you doing?" Sri Dayananda Maharaj didn't translate the question to Srila Prabhupada, but immediately asserted strongly, "The pure devotee has never been a karmi. He is never a karmi. A pure devotee is always a transcendental person right from his birth. He just came from the spiritual world to save us, to teach us this transcendental knowledge given out thousands and thousands of years ago by Lord Krishna." Sri Dayananda Maharaj continued glorifying Srila Prabhupada. "What does he say?" Prabhupada asked. Prabhupada asked Sri Dayananda Maharaj, but he didn't want to say anything to Srila Prabhupada. He said, "Nothing, Srila Prabhupada, nothing." He would speak strongly to the man asking this question, and when Srila Prabhupada would question him, Sri Dayananda Maharaj would be like a little child. "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, it doesn't matter, don't worry about it. He's just talking some nonsense." Then finally, Srila Prabhupada just laughed and took the next question. Sri Dayananda Maharaj, he asks, how can we control the tongue? Prabhupada, you can take prasadam. Prabhupada smiled, and his answer was so pleasurable for everyone that they began to laugh. Prabhupada continued, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said like that, out of all the senses, the tongue sense is very powerful, so it is very difficult to control. Therefore, Krishna has given us one weapon. What is that? Krishna is very kind, therefore he has given us his remnants of foodstuff. So, if we make this promise, that I shall not take anything which is not offered to Krishna, then your tongue will be controlled. The tongue's business is twofold. One is the tongue will speak and vibrate sound, and another business is to taste nice foodstuffs. So if you engage the tongue in the matter of Krishna's service by vibrating Hare Krishna mantra, and if you don't allow your tongue to touch anything which is not offered to Krishna, then you become immediately Krishna realized. When the tongue is controlled, all other senses are automatically controlled. This is the process. Now, again engage your tongue, chanting Hare Krishna. On his cue, the devotees began a kirtan. Srila Prabhupada had given them everything, kirtan, prasadam, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's service, and now, at least for a precious week, Prabhupada was giving them himself. Every morning and night he was chanting with them and being with them, strengthening their faith in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada liked his quarters in the temple. The devotees had divided one big room with a curtain, one side for preaching and one side for resting, and had painted it pastel blue, after the color scheme Srila Prabhupada had requested for his room in Los Angeles. And in their own way, the devotees had tried to make it artistic and Vedic. They had decorated a beautiful asan for him to sit on while meeting with guests. Besides his sitting place was a display of his books, and above the bookcase a silver vase of flowers. Prabhupada continued to work persistently at his Bhagavatam translations and purports. During his last visit to Mexico in 1972, he had been working on the 4th canto. Now he was on the 5th. That he could concentrate on translating while traveling almost constantly was a remarkable achievement. Perhaps only a writer can appreciate how extremely difficult it is to expect to make serious literary composition while at the same time moving continually from room to room, country to country, climate to climate, one week after the next. But Prabhupada had been doing it for years, and he was able to do it because he was completely surrendered to the task, and because Krishna was directly collaborating with him. Devotees had come to expect that Srila Prabhupada would live a very busy life all day, dealing with internal management, with devotees, guests, letters, lectures, travels, and then at night, instead of collapsing for 8 hours of hard-earned rest, that he would lie down for a couple of hours and then rise, unaided, when almost everyone else was asleep, and execute the most demanding task of his entire day, translating and commenting on the Sanskrit verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. That his Bhagavatams were so masterfully rendered could only mean that his work was, as a prominent American professor had described it, God-sent. Many professors, librarians, and scholars were appreciating Srila Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada wrote the devotees in America who were circulating his books in universities and getting reviews, quote, "Thank you very much for sending the book reviews. Send more if you can. These are very, very encouraging. I am keeping a collection of these reviews, and I show them to big scholars and professors when they come to see me. They are very impressed," unquote. But how, at the age of 78, could he write such transcendental literature, which was praised and worshipped by all devotees and appreciated by religious and Sanskrit professors, and at the same time travel and tend to several thousand initiated disciples? One can only begin to understand and appreciate his endeavor. Nanda Prana. Prabhupada was very busy with the translation. Some of us devotees took care of Prabhupada and would stay outside his room all night. We could hear the dictating machine. At 10 o'clock, Prabhupada would stop the dictating machine and turn the lights off. Then, about 2 o'clock, he would rise without an alarm clock and turn the light on. He would keep going with his translations. Devotee. I could see every night Srila Prabhupada very regularly just turned off his light. I couldn't see inside his room, but from a little space underneath the door I could see he was working until late at night. Every devotee would take rest, but he was working until 10 o'clock. At exactly 10 o'clock he would turn off his light. Then, automatically, very regularly, he would turn on the light at 1:30 in the morning. I was very surprised how he could just rest for 3.5 hours and work all day long. I think during the daytime, he would take another nap, but from 1:30 a.m. until the morning, I would see the lights on. Then, in the morning after Mangalarti, he would go on his morning walk. In Chapultepec Park, Srila Prabhupada liked to walk on the narrow road of the philosophers. The early mornings were cold, and he wore his long saffron coat with hood. The simple canvas shoes he wore would become wet from the dew on the grass. His rapid pace made his younger disciples hustle to keep up. Often, Prabhupada's words would go untranslated, and the Mexican boys could catch only a phrase or two, but they were happy to be with their spiritual master. He was interested in the many varieties of trees and sometimes asked about them. Once, stopping before a large dead tree, he examined it carefully. "What is the difference between this dead tree and the others?" he asked. One disciple replied, "This tree is dead because its time is over." "No," Prabhupada said, and tapped his cane on the ground. Another devotee ventured, "This tree has a certain karma different from the others." "No," Prabhupada again tapped his cane on the ground. "The difference is that there is not a soul in this tree." While walking among the trees in Chapultepec Park, Prabhupada spotted a certain eucalyptus twig above his head. He stopped. From as early as 1967 in San Francisco, he had used the twigs of eucalyptus trees as toothbrushes, a Western substitute for the antiseptic neem twigs of India. Kshiti Mohana. Prabhupada pointed to the tree and told Hridayananda Maharaj, "I want that stick." It was a very small one. Hridayananda Maharaj heard Prabhupada. He said, "Prabhupada wants that. Come on, bring it down, bring it down." He wanted to give it to Prabhupada. So we made a pyramid of men with 3 men on the bottom, then 2 men on top of them, and one skinny devotee climbed on top. When the devotee stood and reached up, he was still about 50 centimeters short. But when he made an effort to reach it, the whole pyramid fell to the ground. Prabhupada was watching them, smiling and laughing. Again, they made the pyramid bigger, and the devotee tried to reach it again, but again they fell down. Then more devotees tried. They became wet because of the grass, and Hridayananda Maharaj was very excited, saying, "Come on, Prabhupada wants that. Prabhupada wants that. Keep moving." Prabhupada was smiling at the fun, sometimes watching the twig and sometimes watching the devotees. A 3rd time they tried the pyramid and it fell down. But the 4th time it worked, and the devotee stood up and broke the twig from the tree. He gave it to Hridayananda Maharaj, who gave it to Prabhupada. Prabhupada held it in his hand, inspected it for a minute, and then threw it away. Often during his morning walks, Srila Prabhupada would only chant Hare Krishna, the universal language in which all the Spanish and English-speaking devotees could participate without difficulty. For many of the Mexican disciples, this was their first personal contact with Srila Prabhupada, and they were awed. Occasionally, on a walk, Srila Prabhupada would suddenly sit on a bench, and as many as 15 disciples would quickly gather at his feet, looking up to him. Muni Priya. Prabhupada sat down in the park. The people around Prabhupada also sat and came to see Prabhupada. People were sitting and looking to Prabhupada, and he was also looking at all the devotees. And all the devotees were waiting to hear from Prabhupada. Nobody makes a sound. Prabhupada looked at all the devotees and then said, "Chant Hare Krishna." Then all the devotees came to love him, because all the people were waiting for Srila Prabhupada to talk about philosophy. These boys don't expect Srila Prabhupada to suddenly say, chant Hare Krishna. And they came to love him because Prabhupada said this in the middle of a silence. When Prabhupada saw the joggers, he remarked, "If they say they don't care about the ultimate meaning of life, why are they running?" "They are running," he said, "because they are all afraid of death." They passed a martial arts class, 2 rows of men in black leotards gesturing aggressively in unison. "Who are they fighting?" he asked. He said that when he explains philosophically that everyone is afraid of death, people reply, "No, I'm not afraid." But if they are not afraid of death, then why are they doing all this? And he gestured toward the mock fighting and laughed. One morning, he stopped at a large garbage container and asked about the sign on it. Hridayananda Maharaj replied, "It says, 'Put the garbage in this place.'" "Then the whole material world will be there," Srila Prabhupada replied, "but it is too big to put into this container." Another morning, riding back to the temple in the car, Prabhupada asked the driver, Nanda Prana, to go faster. Hridayananda Maharaj translated Prabhupada's order to the driver, who sped up slightly. Srila Prabhupada then astonished them by asking, "Que pasa, Nanda Prana?" And when the ride was over, he added, "Muchas gracias." There was no scarcity of flowers in Mexico City, and every morning during Guru Puja, over 100 devotees and guests would come one by one before Srila Prabhupada to offer a palmful of flower petals at his lotus feet. By the end of the Guru Puja, a small hill of flower petals spilled over Srila Prabhupada's legs until finally he would gather up handfuls and throw them out to the ecstatic devotees who continued their chanting and dancing with even greater rigor. On Prabhupada's second morning in Mexico City, he spoke from Bhagavad Gita 2:12 on how the soul is eternally individual. When you actually understand, Srila Prabhupada said, that you are not American or Indian or Mexican, but that you are spirit soul, then your spiritual life begins. He said the symptom of identifying oneself with the soul is that one becomes jubilant, jolly, and to attain this, one has to undergo a process of purification. Without purification, you cannot understand God. But Lord Chaitanya's prescription, which we are simply propagating, is chant Hare Krishna. So I am very glad to see that you Mexican young boys, girls, ladies, and gentlemen are coming here and joining and chanting Hare Krishna. I request you to continue this procedure. Please come here, join this chanting of Hare Krishna mantra, and take prasadam and go home. And surely you will be purified and qualified for going back home, back to Godhead. Questions and answers followed, with Hridayananda Maharaj translating. Hridayananda Maharaj. He wants to know if within marriage it is possible to achieve perfection. Prabhupada. Yes. Human being is meant for marriage, not the cats and dogs. If you can remain without marriage, without sex life, that is very good, but if you can't, then marry and be gentlemen and remain peaceful. Hridayananda Maharaj. He wants to know if one can achieve Krishna consciousness outside the temple. Prabhupada. Oh, yes. You have to follow the rules and regulations, that's all. Hridayananda Maharaj. What about when one breaks the principles? Can Krishna forgive him? Prabhupada. Yes. Krishna can forgive you once, twice, but not regularly. Prabhupada smiled and the devotees laughed with him. Hridayananda Maharaj. Sometimes people come and join our movement and follow the 4 principles, but there appears to be a fault in their character. So he says that by following the process gradually, the defects will be diminished. But is there any way to more rapidly? Prabhupada. If a man comes and follows the regulative principles, even for some time, and again he falls down, so long as he has followed, that asset is permanent. Anything, spiritual asset, is never lost. So, little, when it is complete, cent percent, then you become liberated. Spiritual asset is never lost. Even if a person comes to the temple, follows the regulative principles for some time, and again falls down, he is not a loser, he is a gainer. Others who do not take this lesson, who keep outside and perform their so-called material duties very perfectly, they are losers. So at least for some time, let every one of you come here and follow the restriction. If you become perfect, it is all right, but even if you go away, whatever you have done, that is your permanent asset. That is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even that little asset can help you become freed from the greatest danger. So in the Bhagavad Gita it is stated, even if such a person falls down, he is given a chance in next life to take birth in a very rich aristocratic family or in a very pious Brahmin family. A little spiritual asset in this human form of life will at least guarantee your next life in a very nice family. But without spiritual life, there is no guarantee whether you are going to become human being or cat or dog. Since Srila Prabhupada's last visit, the devotees had received his permission and had installed deities of Radha Krishna. Srila Prabhupada criticized, however, that their dress was not up to standard. He said that the opulent deity worship followed in Los Angeles ISKCON was the standard they should adopt. When he saw a painted backdrop behind the deities depicting the land of Vrindavan, he said that this Vrindavan mood of spontaneous love for Krishna was too elevated for ordinary devotees. Again, he stressed the worship of Krishna in awe and opulence, as he appeared in Dwarka. The devotees should study the worship of Rukmini Dwarkadish in Los Angeles. One day, Srila Prabhupada asked to sample the contents of Radha Krishna's plate directly from the altar. He tasted the prasadam and approved. But on another occasion, he went to the kitchen and found that the pujaris had put new flowers in the same place as old rejected flowers. "These are the flowers to offer to Krishna?" he asked with disapproval. He requested Hridayananda Maharaj to find a qualified devotee to become the head pujari and oversee the deity worship. Hridayananda Maharaj brought Kshiti Mohana before Prabhupada in his room, and Prabhupada began to talk about how the most important service was to increase the deity worship. "No," Kshiti Mohana replied, "Sankirtan is most important." "You should never say no to Prabhupada," Hridayananda Maharaj corrected. "Yes, Prabhupada," Kshiti Mohana replied. Prabhupada then asked him to become the head pujari. Kshiti Mohana, speaking in Spanish, told Hridayananda Maharaj that he was afraid he would commit too many offenses to the deity. Hridayananda Maharaj assured him that he could learn as he went. Because Prabhupada wanted him to do it, he would gradually become expert. Srila Prabhupada did not take outside engagements during this visit to Mexico. Rather, he asked that interested persons be brought to see him in his room. Each evening, therefore, he would meet with several guests. The first evening, several professors and Indian gentlemen, as well as Hanuman and Hridayananda Maharaj, all came to Prabhupada's room. Hanuman asked Srila Prabhupada why his disciples were so fortunate as to have a genuine spiritual master, whereas many others have bogus teachers. "Every disciple will think his guru is good and that others are bogus," Srila Prabhupada replied. "But there is a standard for who is a spiritual master. Spiritual master means one who is the best servant of God. But one who does not accept the existence of God, he's a mudha, a rascal. A rascal cannot become a spiritual master." Professor: Do you have any opinion about some of the other Indian spiritual masters? The professor named several well-known gurus. At the mention of a certain popular young guru, Srila Prabhupada interrupted. "He says that he is God himself. Then he is a bogus. How can he be God? God is so cheap. Only the foolish persons will accept him, those who have no knowledge." At the mention of a famous meditator, Srila Prabhupada said, "I think he doesn't speak anything about God. He speaks something on material prosperity." At the mention of another guru, Prabhupada replied, "He also says, 'I am Bhagavan.' Therefore he is bogus. How can you say you yourself are Bhagavan, God? So, even if people accept him as God because he shows some jugglery or creates a little gold, then if by creating some gold he is God, then there is a bigger God that has created the gold mine. Why should I go to this tiny God? I must go to the big God who has created all the gold mines." Professor: I have great difficulty with the meaning of the term perfect knowledge. Could you... Prabhupada: Perfect knowledge means what you say is correct. There is no mistake. Professor: Under any and all circumstances? Prabhupada: Yes, that is perfect knowledge. Not like the scientists. They change. They say, yes, it was this, and now it is changed. This is not perfect knowledge. Perfect knowledge is that which you say that is correct forever. Just like a man dies. If someone says, man dies, it is perfect knowledge. It is correct forever. Professor: Suppose he is reincarnated. Prabhupada: Dies means the body dies. The soul does not die. Na hanyate hanyamane sharire. The Indian guest asked Srila Prabhupada about Varna Sankara, the rapid increase in unplanned for, unwanted progeny. Prabhupada replied that since there was no following of the Varnashram system, the world population was going to hell. The Varna Sankara has come to such an extent, he said, that they are killing the child, and that is legal. They have come down to such an extreme position. The Indian man replied, "But surely there is a practical point of view also. If there is nothing to eat, what will happen?" Prabhupada, "Who says nothing to eat? That is also their manufacturer." Indian guest, "I meant the figures which are published." Prabhupada, "Especially we who are Indian know it is advertised that we are poverty-stricken. All over the world that is advertised. Wherever I go, they say, 'Oh, you're coming from India?' Because our government is simply begging. But who is dying of poverty? Dying is going on in other countries also. They are committing suicide. And maybe some persons are dying out of starvation. You cannot stop death. Suppose you have got enough food. That means everything is solved? In America, there is enough food. Why are they becoming hippies? There is no shortage of food. Nothing. Everything is abundant. But why are they becoming hippies? They are lying down on the street, in the park. I've seen in London the St. James Park. They are sleeping and the police are screaming, 'Hey, get out, get out.' So why? The British nation is not a poor nation. The American nation is not a poor nation." Indian guest, "Poverty is also comparative." Prabhupada, "No, I saw in Amsterdam, simply full of hippies lying down on the street with no food or shelter. It is going on." Indian guest, "The hippies are not lying in the park because they lack food." Prabhupada, "They must be wanting something. They are in need of something." Indian guest, "But not necessarily food." Prabhupada, One body is in need of food, another body is in need of something else. They are needy. Everyone is needy. That you have to accept. I have seen in Los Angeles. I was walking in the Beverly Hills quarter, and one hippie boy is coming from a very nice house. Beverly Hills, that quarter is resided by all rich class, and he has got a very nice car, but he is hippie. Why? His father is very rich man. He has got nice car. He might be very educated. Then why is he hippie? What is the answer? Indian guest, "He's frustrated." Prabhupada, "That means he is in need. That is the question. You may be in need of food. I may be in need of some woman. He may be in need of some money. In this way, everyone is needy. Therefore, ultimately, everyone should search after God. Then every need will be fulfilled." One night, some priests visited. They expressed appreciation for Prabhupada's work in Mexico, but questioned if his mission could also be done through their own church. Prabhupada answered that he never said the Krishna consciousness movement was the only way. If anyone strictly follows his own true religion, he can achieve success. But Prabhupada added, "It is very difficult to find a real Christian these days. Although Jesus Christ upheld the scriptures and quoted, 'Thou shalt not kill,' the Christians, he said, were very expert in killing. They take pride in bullfighting," Prabhupada added. "This is their position. So it is very difficult to find out a real Christian." The priests became uneasy and soon excused themselves. Another evening, a former Miss Mexico came to see Prabhupada. Accompanied by two sophisticated, wealthy-looking men, ex-Miss Mexico was very glamorous, fluttering her eyelashes as she talked. Although not quite in her element, she tried to be diplomatic and was effusively appreciative of everything. "I really like your center here," she told Prabhupada through a translator, "and I think I would like to come back and learn more about it." Prabhupada was unaffected. "Why do you want to come here?" he asked. "You don't understand this Krishna consciousness movement. Have you read my books?" What? "Have you read my books?" "No, I haven't." "Well, do you know our philosophy?" No." "If you want to come here, then you listen and understand this philosophy. It is most important. Then you can say you want to come back." Prabhupada then turned his attention to other people in the room, and ex-Miss Mexico and her friends sat in silence, listening. Devotee: I was the doorkeeper outside Srila Prabhupada's room, and I was very concerned about my job. I was taking it as my life and soul, guarding the door of Srila Prabhupada. Sri Dayananda Maharaj told me, if you get the opportunity, just go into the room and see how Prabhupada is talking to the guests. It is very important for you. So I thought, well, I have permission for that. So when a man in the government working in the educational program came and got an interview with Srila Prabhupada, I got the opportunity to go inside the room. I thought, well, maybe Srila Prabhupada will not be angry with me if I go inside the room. Let me try. I went into the room and I was listening to the talk. At that time, my English wasn't nice, but I could get some of the matter they were talking about. Srila Prabhupada was explaining the importance of the Vedic point of view in the educational program. He was explaining that the main point in the Vedic system was to teach that we are servant of God. I thought maybe Srila Prabhupada would be very diplomatic. He will not go directly to the point, but he was preaching very, very directly. He was making all the points to this man. He was telling him how we teach our children from the very childhood in the Vedic standard of waking the children early in the morning, taking bath, attending Mangalarti. But the most surprise for me occurred when the man finally had to leave. He was saying, "Oh, Your Divine Grace, I am very glad I could have the opportunity to speak with you." Srila Prabhupada was talking in a very friendly way with him. The man was receptive. It was not an atmosphere of challenging. Srila Prabhupada was very nice with him. Prabhupada then told the man, "We have a lot of books. You are working with books in the government. You are giving books to the schools. So I will be very glad if you can take some of these and read, and then you will see in a more broad way all the topics we were discussing today." The man said, "Oh yes, I would like to." At that time, I was doing book distribution as my full-time engagement. I thought, oh, I don't know if Prabhupada wants to ask him for some money. I think Prabhupada is not going to ask him for money, because he is a guest. I thought that Prabhupada was probably going to say, yes, keep the books and goodbye, Hare Krishna. I expected that he would let the other sannyasis take care of selling any books. But I was very surprised that when the man agreed to take the books, Srila Prabhupada said, "Please give him some books." The devotees then gave some of our Spanish translation books. We only had a few, but we immediately gave them. Then the man said, "Is there anything I have to pay for these books?" I thought Srila Prabhupada would say, "No, just keep it with you," and Hare Krishna. But Prabhupada said very gravely, "If you want to give something for the books, we will accept." Then the man took out some money, and Prabhupada made a sign indicating that he should please give it to one of the devotees. It was a surprise to me just to see how Srila Prabhupada didn't miss an opportunity. He was the teacher of all of us, an expert at making transcendental Sankirtan. I learned from that incident that I will never feel embarrassed in front of anyone just to ask for a donation for Srila Prabhupada's books. I felt at that time that Srila Prabhupada himself had a lot of respect for his books, not because they were his books, but because the books, as he told us, and as we could see by his practical example, the books were his whole life. Since Sri Dayananda Goswami was Prabhupada's direct representative for Latin America, Prabhupada called to see him frequently while in Mexico. He wanted his GBC men to understand fully the importance of the Krishna consciousness movement and to know practically how to conduct it and propagate it. He wanted them eventually to do all the managing of the institution's affairs, freeing him to translate the Bhagavatam. He had written about this responsibility in a letter to Sri Dayananda Goswami in 1972, shortly after awarding him sannyas. Quote, "Now you must all, sannyasis, GBC members, and other leaders, become very serious to actually give the humankind the greatest welfare, namely this Krishna consciousness movement. Your task ahead is very huge, but it will be quite simple and easy if you simply do as I am doing. You must become conversant in every feature wherever it is needed throughout the society. Our first business is to preach to the devotees and to maintain the highest standard of Vaishnava education. Management must be there as well, just as I am preaching daily from Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, but I am also going to the bank, making investments, seeing the trial balance, making letters, seeing how things are going on, like that. So you must become expert in all these matters, just as I am giving you example." Unquote. One evening, after lecturing in the temple room, Prabhupada was talking in his room with Hridayananda Goswami. Sitting on Prabhupada's desk was a world globe, and Hridayananda Maharaj was showing Prabhupada the extent of his Latin American preaching field. Srila Prabhupada sat, gently spinning the globe, finally stopping it with his finger on Mexico. "What do you know about this country?" he asked. Hridayananda Maharaj began telling him as much as he knew about the culture, government, and history of Mexico. Then Prabhupada gave the globe another spin, stopping it with his finger on Argentina, and Hridayananda Maharaj told what he knew about the people and life of Argentina. "Now we will give you some information about India," said Prabhupada, smiling. And he named India's exports and the provinces from which they came. He spoke of the relationship between ancient India and South America, of Lord Ramchandra, who millions of years ago had gone to Brazil. From Sri Lanka to Brazil had been a tunnel, and all the gold of Ravan's kingdom had come through that tunnel from Brazil. Hridayananda Maharaj was thrilled that Srila Prabhupada was including him in such an intimate, friendly talk, and they continued exchanging information while pointing to the places on the globe. One day, Hridayananda Maharaj came into Prabhupada's room looking unhappy. "What is the difficulty?" Prabhupada asked him. Hridayananda Maharaj took pride in never complaining to Prabhupada or bringing him bad news and disturbing him. But having almost reached his breaking point, he confessed, "Prabhupada, it's impossible here. They are always stealing." Prabhupada consoled him. "Yes, in one of our Indian centers also they have stolen a rug. What can I do?" Prabhupada said, as if sharing his disciples' helplessness. But then he said, "Actually, my father had a friend who owned a factory. He would pay the factory workers a small wage. Once someone complained, 'Why do you underpay your workers?' Then he said, 'No, I pay them so much and they steal so much. It comes out to the proper amount.'" Prabhupada began to laugh. "My father told me that if you have a servant and he does not steal from you, then he is not bona fide. He's not a bona fide servant." Hridayananda Maharaj laughed along with Prabhupada, and his unhappiness vanished. Once, Prabhupada sent a message for Hridayananda Maharaj to come immediately. When Hridayananda ran into Prabhupada's room and offered obeisances, he found Prabhupada sitting in a leisurely position, reading the Krishna book. Prabhupada looked up with great happiness and asked, "Have you read these books?" Prabhupada was enjoying his own book, not because he had written the book, but because the book was Krishna. "Have you read these books?" Prabhupada repeated. "Yes, Prabhupada, a little." "Aren't they wonderful?" asked Prabhupada. "Especially Chaitanya Charitamrita. They are so wonderful." Having said this, Prabhupada returned his attention to the Krishna book, reading silently to himself. After sitting for a few minutes, Hridayananda Maharaj gratefully left the room, desiring to follow Prabhupada's example. One evening, when several professors came to visit Srila Prabhupada, one of them asked, "Why does anything exist?" Srila Prabhupada replied that the purpose of existence is ananda, pleasure. At first, the professor resisted. He was seeking an answer referring to a higher plane. But Srila Prabhupada insisted that ananda exists on the higher plane. "When we have got this body changing," he said, "there is no ananda, because we are sometimes diseased, and then we have to become an old man. But we are eternal, so we are seeking after something which is eternal, ananda. That is the purpose of life." In his Bhagavad Gita lectures, Srila Prabhupada was methodically proceeding through the second chapter, now discussing the distinction between the eternal soul and the temporary body. Sometimes he lectured both morning and evening. When beginning his explanation of the 14th verse, he said, "So, from last night's discussion, it is to be concluded that we are not going to die. But in preparation for the next life," Prabhupada explained, "we have to tolerate material pains and pleasures. Sometimes the rules and regulations are there. They may be painful, but we cannot give them up. We have to learn how to tolerate." Prabhupada quoted a Bengali proverb that said, "Anything you practice with your body, you can learn to tolerate." So, if by practicing Krishna consciousness you can go back to home, back to Godhead, why should you neglect? That will solve all your problems. After the lecture, someone asked, "What are the characteristics of a person who has realized that he is not this body?" "He is engaged in Krishna consciousness," Srila Prabhupada replied. "He doesn't know anything but Krishna. That is normal condition." One evening, after an unusual number of impertinent questions, Hridayananda Maharaj stopped translating and instructed the crowd not to ask nonsensical questions. Immediately, one of the ladies raised her hand. "I've heard from the devotees," she began, "that at the time of leaving my body, it will be a very important test for my life for getting my next body. I've also heard from the devotees that it is important for us to think of Lord Krishna at that time of passing away of our body. What I want to ask your Divine Grace is it as good as thinking of Krishna at the time of my death to think of you?" Hridayananda Maharaj presented her question to Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada smiled. "Yes, that is very good. You will get the same result." In the morning, for his breakfast, Prabhupada ate lightly of fruit and cashews. He especially liked a local fruit known as guavana, and he drank guavana juice every day. At noon, he also ate lightly, avoiding the samosas and pakoras and eating mostly dal, rice, chapatis, and the sabji. The Mexican devotees would wait eagerly outside Prabhupada's door to take the remnants from his plate. They were particularly eager for a bite of anything Prabhupada had tasted. Kshiti Mohana. One morning, Srutakirti gave me the plate remnants of Prabhupada. It contained milk, oranges, already sucked, and skins of chickpeas. There was also ginger. At that time, there was a Srimad Bhagavatam class going on, but when the devotees saw me with the plate, some of them left the class and ran toward me. They started to take pieces of orange and ginger. One devotee got pushed and fell down. That disturbed the class, and the devotee giving the class was very upset. Some of the devotees kept sitting, but some of them, when they saw the remnants, left the place and ran upstairs and started to fight also. Then Srila Prabhupada opened his door because of the noise, and he saw everything. He smiled and went to his room again. Most of the Mexican devotees got little direct association with Srila Prabhupada because they could not understand English, and because they had other services to render. They were never demanding, since they knew Srila Prabhupada was busy translating and working to save all the fallen souls around the world. Moreover, Prabhupada was a very great personality, and his disciples did not think themselves worthy to push forward and demand his special attention. Nevertheless, sometimes the devotees who took turns keeping guard outside Prabhupada's room would have a special encounter with him. Nandaprana. One of the devotees was a bodyguard when he was a karmi, taking care of important people in the government. So he was already involved in these things. Mostly in the nighttime, there were some of us who were just taking watch 3 or 4 hours outside his room, taking care of him. We were thinking that maybe some dangerous man or some crazy man is coming, and they would want to make something with Srila Prabhupada. We wanted to put Srila Prabhupada very secure. Every night I was doing the schedule from 9 o'clock at night until 2 o'clock. At that time, I was supposed to go and wake up the next guard. Ritu. I was taking care of Srila Prabhupada's sleep security. I used to chant rounds during the night. So it was midnight and I was chanting, and this devotee, Jagannath Mishra, told me that I should not chant so loud because it would bother Srila Prabhupada. I said, no, Prabhupada doesn't mind if we chant loud. I kept on chanting loudly, and then I saw Srila Prabhupada open the curtains in his room. He was standing there very humbly, not angry, but smiling. He made a motion to me, meaning, please do chant so loudly. Then he folded his palms and was smiling. Kshiti Mohana. I was like a helper. If the servants needed something, we were right there to get it. We would rest, taking care of the door day and night. Once they had a problem with Prabhupada's tape recorder. At that time, Prabhupada had to stop translating. So, Hridayananda Maharaj called me and told me that he heard that I knew how to fix tape recorders and electricity. I went into Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada was reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was moving his toes. There was a tulsi there on his desk. By using his hands, Prabhupada was showing me that the tape recorder didn't work. He wanted to be busy with his service. When I looked at it, the only thing wrong was that the plug wasn't very well plugged in. I fixed it and put the tape on. And Prabhupada's voice started to come out. Then he said, everything is all right, thank you, Hare Krishna. Then he asked me some questions through Hridayananda Maharaj translating. He asked, are there cows here in Mexico? Do you kill them and eat them? Also, he asked, what is the coin in Mexico? When he asked about the cows, I answered that. And when he asked about the coin, I said, it is a peso. When Prabhupada heard about the cows, he shook his head. Then he was explaining that everywhere they have cows and they kill them off and eat them. And that's why civilization is as it is now in crisis. Now society is paying reactions, and they are going to pay more reactions because of that. Then he told me, now you can leave. I had to leave because my service was to take care of the door, and Prabhupada had other services. Muni Priya. I was a guard at the door. After 2 o'clock in the morning, Prabhupada came out in a gangsha. I said, Jai Prabhupada, Haribo. I wanted to get down and offer my obeisances. Prabhupada said, no, just chant Hare Krishna. Chant Hare Krishna. Donio Fernandez. I was in charge of the microphone. One time I was adjusting it right in front of Prabhupada, and he saw me and smiled. I felt very happy. I had no time to dance with the other devotees because I was in charge of the sound system. One day I put aside the sound and started dancing. Prabhupada saw me, and I felt that he was thinking, you must go back to your sound. And so I went back, because that was my service. Hridayananda Maharaj. We were very anxious to serve Srila Prabhupada nicely because he so very rarely ever came to Latin America. Therefore, whatever he wanted, whenever he said, why don't you bring this, we would have 3 or 4 devotees standing by like firemen, and they would practically slide down the banister and jump into 2 or 3 different cars and tear out of the driveway on 2 wheels with tires screeching. They would have a race to see who could bring it back first. Usually, within 10 or 15 minutes, they would have it, whatever Prabhupada wanted. One time, I brought Prabhupada his breakfast plate, and he said, aren't there any cashew nuts? I immediately ran out to the banister and shouted, cashew nuts! Immediately, they started jumping down the stairs, and cars were screeching out of the driveway. While Prabhupada was still eating his breakfast, we brought in the nuts. Then he said, no, never mind, I don't need them. The last Bhagavad Gita class Prabhupada gave in Mexico was on the 17th verse of the 2nd chapter. If you simply become interested in this small span of life, Prabhupada said, say 50 or 60 or 100 years at most, but you neglect your eternal existence, is that intelligence? We are teaching that science, and the Bhagavad Gita is there. Take advantage of it. As always, there were questions. Hridayananda Maharaj. He would like to become Krishna conscious, but he wants to know if you believe in God. The absurdity of this question made the devotees laugh. Prabhupada, what is that? Hridayananda Maharaj, he wants to know if you believe in God. Prabhupada, I don't believe in God. You believe in God. Why, I'll not believe. If you can believe, I can believe also. It is not believing, though. It is fact. We are explaining the fact, how the existence of God is there. There is no question of believe or not believe. The fact is fact. Hridayananda Maharaj, when we offer something to you, for example, to your picture, he wants to know if spiritually, simply by the act of offering, do we become purified? Or is the spiritual master actually aware of the offering? Prabhupada, yes. The spiritual master is the representative of God. Whatever you offer to the spiritual master, it goes to God. Hridayananda Maharaj, his point is the spiritual master actually conscious of our activities? Prabhupada, the spiritual master may not be conscious, but God is conscious, and through God he is also conscious.